He was the man who broke the speed of sound on wheels. He crossed 341 miles per hour in a car with no doors. He was one of the most fearless competitors the NHRA had ever seen. And then one day, without warning, the seat was gone. The helmet was set down. And Bob Tasca III was standing on the outside of his own car, watching someone else drive it. What really happened? Because the official version and the real story, they are not exactly the same thing. Before we go any further, let me know where you're watching this from, drop your city or country in the comments, then let's get back to Bob's story. Here is what you need to understand. Bob Tasca III was not just some driver. He was the grandson of Bob Tasca Sr., the man whose fingerprints are literally on the original Ford Mustang Cobra jet. Drag racing was not a career for this family. It was blood. It was identity. It was a promise made across 3 generations. And Bob III carried that weight every single time he strapped into a 10,000 horsepower funny car and tried to do something that no wheel-driven vehicle on Earth had ever done. So when the announcement came that he was stepping out of the car, the drag racing world did not just raise an eyebrow. It stopped breathing. Tasca Racing made it official in January of 2026. Two-time and reigning NHRA Funny Car World Champion Austin Prock and his family crew would join Tasca Racing to wheel the Ford Mustang, while Bob Tasca III himself would sit out the 2026 season to support the new partnership. That was the statement. Clean. Professional. Controlled. But here is what nobody was saying out loud. Bob Tasca III did not run out of talent. He did not run out of heart. So what actually ran out? NHRA. Tasca himself eventually broke the silence, and the answer was brutally honest. The bottom line is we just couldn't do 2 cars this season. There was too much going on. We didn't have the funding for the second car in full. And quite frankly, we didn't have the parts and pieces. Money. Parts. Resources. The machinery of a championship-level NHRA program demands an almost incomprehensible investment, and running 2 top-tier cars simultaneously was simply not on the table. But that is only part of the story. Because the bigger question is this: why bring Austin Prock in at all? Competition plus. Tasca answered that one too. I'm not out here for any other reason, he said, referring to his singular obsession with winning a championship. I want to deliver that for Ford. I want to deliver it for all these Ford fans out here. And I knew my best shot to do that was to partner up and bring the Prock family on board and for me to step out of the car and put Austin in. I can tell you this, I wouldn't have done it for anyone else. I wouldn't have done it. It had to be the package. Read that again. He would not have stepped out of his own car for anyone else on Earth. That is how rare Austin Prock's profile was. And that is how serious Bob Tasca was about the promise he had made. Competition plus. Because there was a promise. Bob Tasca III had personally guaranteed Ford that if it returned to NHRA drag racing, he would deliver them a funny car championship. That was not just a business agreement. That was a man putting his family name on the line. The same name that helped build the Mustang. The same name that was painted on the side of that car. So when the championship kept coming just close enough to hurt but never close enough to hold, something had to change. Competition plus. But then something changed that nobody expected. Before all of that, before the Prock deal, before the stepping aside, there was a moment in Gainesville, Florida, in March of 2025, that told you everything you needed to know about who Bob Tasca III really was. He had just won a round at the Gator Nationals. He was standing at the top end of the track with a microphone in his face and the entire Fox Sports broadcast audience watching. And instead of talking about his run, instead of playing the game, he did something that shocked everyone in the pit lane. He grabbed the microphone and called out Fox Sports directly, live on air, for their IndyCar advertising campaign that claimed to feature the fastest motorsport in the world. On the very network that was broadcasting his race. In front of his own sponsors. This was not a carefully planned media moment. This was a man who had reached his limit. He said it plainly: it's an insult to our fans and to the drivers for Fox to go on TV and say the fastest motorsport on Earth, and it's IndyCar. The drag racing world exploded. Some people cheered. Some people cringed. And the NHRA itself quietly launched a social media campaign called #NHRA Speed Check. Even the sanctioning body knew Tasca had just handed them the biggest free promotion of the season. Drag Illustrated Ford Authority. But here is the detail that gets overlooked. NHRA's top fuel and funny car drivers regularly exceed 330 miles per hour, while the fastest an Indy car can reach is approximately 235 miles per hour. Tasca was not being dramatic. He was being factual. He was defending an entire sport that he believed was being diminished by the very network paid to amplify it. That is the kind of man we are talking about. Newsbreak. And then there was Charlotte. A year earlier. A moment that showed the other side of that intensity, the side that can get you into trouble. In 2024 at the Charlotte NHRA 4-wide Nationals, NHRA disqualified Bob Tasca 3-second qualifying run after discovering that his intake manifold had been media blasted, a process considered a technical infraction under NHRA rules. The manifold looked different. The color had changed. And even though the dimensions were identical, the rule book said any modification from original accepted state was illegal. NHRA. Tasca was furious, not with the rule, but with the communication. He explained that he had actually handed his manifolds to NHRA officials in Gainesville earlier that season and asked them to verify legality. They returned the parts without flagging any issues. Then in Charlotte, after running, they told him the parts were illegal. He said openly, "They gave them back to me to run, so now all of the manifolds in my trailer have been floated, every one of them. I don't have a part to run this race." He was not cheating. He was caught in a communication gap that the rulebook was not flexible enough to account for. And he said so publicly. That kind of honesty, that kind of confrontational transparency, it cost him on the track. But it earned him something that very few people in any sport ever earn. Credibility. Drag Illustrated. That is when everything fell apart, and yet nothing fell apart. Because here is what happened in the months after Charlotte, after the Fox Sports moment, after season of coming so close, Bob Tasca III made the hardest call a competitor can make. He looked at his program. He looked at Austin Prock, the man who had just won back-to-back NHRA Funny Car championships. He looked at the Prock family crew, Father Jimmy as crew chief, son Austin as driver, a full package that was suddenly available when they walked away from John Force Racing. And he made a decision that his ego absolutely did not want to make, but his championship promise demanded. Prock's record at that point was 168-88 across 109 races. He was the 20th person in NHRA history to win in both Top Fuel and Funny Car. In 2024, he had set the class record for most #1 qualifying positions in a single season at 15. There was no driver on earth with a stronger resume at that exact moment. And the announcement was made live on stage at the 2026 Ford Racing launch event in Detroit in January. Tasca pointed proudly at his new hire. Prock flashed a championship ring. And Bob Tasca III, the grandson of a legend, the man who had broken 340 miles per hour, stepped willingly out of his own spotlight. Competition plus NHRA. But here is the twist that changes everything. He never planned to disappear. While the world assumed he was walking away from racing entirely, Tasca was already planning a test session. He announced he would be getting back in the car at Summit Motorsports Park in Norwalk, Ohio, driving the very same machine that Austin Prock had just used to win at Maryland International Raceway. "I'm getting back in the Prock rocket. I'm going to drive the car. Obviously, I want to keep my license current," Tasca said. Competition plus. Let that sink in. The man stepped out of his seat, handed the keys to a two-time champion, and then scheduled a private test just to make sure he could still do it. Because Bob Tasca III was never retiring. He was evolving. He was building something bigger than any single championship, a team with the infrastructure, the talent, and the legacy to win consistently and win for Ford. Not just for himself. And maybe that is the real story. Not the exit. Not the controversy. Not the television rant or the Charlotte DQ or the funding reality check. The real story is what it takes to love something so much that you are willing to step back from it, not because you are done, but because you believe in it more than you believe in your own ego. Bob Tasca III could have stayed in the car. Mediocre. Safe. Still Bob Tasca III. Instead, he made the move that only the most dangerous kind of competitor ever makes, the one that puts the mission above the identity. That is the kind of story that does not end. It just shifts into a different gear. And if you know anything about Bob Tasca III, you know that whatever gear comes next, it is not going to be slow. If this story hit different for you, drop a comment below. What do you think Bob does next? Does he come back as a driver? Does he win that championship as an owner? And if you want more stories like this, the ones behind the headlines, the ones the press releases don't tell you, subscribe. Because there is always more to the story.